First, we're going to be working on graphing linear equations. So we have been able to look at a graph and come up with the equation, but now what we're going to do is we're going to be given an equation and create the graph. So the first do now question is, what does it mean to be linear? And the second, I want you to identify the slope and the y-intercept in the following equation. So take a few minutes, pause this video, and try to answer those questions. Okay, so after taking a few seconds and completing the do now, we know that linear means something that has a constant rate of change. And that means that whatever we have there in a linear function, and we see that word line inside right linear, means that we have a straight line. So and if something's linear, it means it's a straight line. Then we needed to identify the slope and the y-intercept of that equation. Y equals 1/2 x minus 1. So remember, our equations are always in that slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b, where the m, or the number that is in front of the x, is our 1/2. That's our slope. And our b, which is that constant value, is a minus 1, which means it's a negative 1. So we have our slope, m equals 1/2, and our b, or our y-intercept, equals negative 1. So next, we're going to learn how to graph linear equations. So I'm
given my equation here at the top. Y equals 1/2 x minus 1, which is just what we did up there in our do now. So we know our equation is in that slope-intercept form. We are given two different things through the slope-intercept equation, and we have our m and our b. So, and we already identified our m and our b up there. So when we're graphing lines, the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to graph the y-intercept. So step 1 is going to be to graph the y-intercept. Or that b value. And here I know my b is negative 1. Now we know a y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. So it's telling us our graph crosses the y-axis at negative 1. So we're going to go on the y-axis to negative 1 and plot that point. Our second step is to create more points on that graph. In order to create additional points on that graph, we need to use our slope. So step 2 is going to be to plot points using the slope. And here I have my slope is 1/2. Now, when we're looking at a graph, we know that our slope formula is rise over run. So we're going to use that in order to help us plot the other points on the graph. So here I have a 1 over a 2, so that's a positive 1 over a positive 2. If we're talking about rise over run, rise is always talking about going up and down, whereas run is talking about left and right. If I have a positive 1, that tells me I'm going up 1. And if I have a positive 2, it tells me I'm going to the right 2. So that's how we're going to plot the rest of our points. So we're going to go to that point that we already plotted at my y-intercept, and I'm going to go up 1, right 2, and there's my next point. Then I'm going to continue that. From that point, I'm going to go up 1 and right 2 to plot that point. And continue that pattern. Up 1, right 2. Up 1, right 2. Up 1, right 2. Now, if I wanted to go in the other direction, we are going to do the complete opposite. Instead of going up 1, I'm going to go down 1. Instead of going right 2, I'm going to go left 2. So from that y-intercept there, I'm going to go down 1, left 2, and plot that point. Down 1, left 2, plot that point. Down 1, left 2, plot that point, and continue till I get to the end of the graph. Then my next step is going to be to draw a line through the graph. And my arrows at the end of the graph, because even though the graph ends, the line could continue to go on. So we're going to take our straight edge and we are going to go and draw a line through our graph. And finally, the final step is going to be to label the graph with the equation. So that means I'm going to take my equation, y equals 1/2 x minus 1, and just write it along the line. So for the next example, we have the equation y equals -3 over 2x plus 1. So our first step is going to be to plot that y-intercept. And here in my equation, my y-intercept is that +1. So we're going to go on our y-axis and graph and put a point at that +1. Next, we need to identify the slope. Here, my slope is -3/2. So now the question is, where does that negative go? So what you get to decide is where that negative goes. So you can choose for the slope to be -3 over a +2, or it could be a +3 over a -2. So remember, we're following the formula of rise over run. So if we're rising -3, that really tells me we're not going up 3, but we're going down 3. And then if we have a +2, it tells me we're going to the right 2. So what we're going to do is from that y-intercept, I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3, and to the right 2 and plot that point. And we're going to continue that pattern. We're going to go down 1, 2, 3, and right 1, 2. Down 1, 2, 3, right 2. And I can't go any further. So then, if we had to go in the opposite way, that's where we're going to use the other one. So instead of a -3 here, we have a +3. So instead of going down 3, it's telling me I'm going to go up 3. And the -2 tells me I'm going to go to the left 2. So these are the same thing, just the opposites. So here from my y-intercept, I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3, left 1, 2. Up 1, 2, 3, left 1, 2. Up 1, 2, 3, left 2.
Then we need to draw our line and put arrows at the end of it. So we're going to take our straight edge. We're going to draw that line and put our arrows at the end. And then finally, we're going to label the line with the equation. So along that line, I'm going to write y equals -3/2 x plus 1.
So for the next example, we have y equals -2x plus 5. First thing we're going to identify in order to graph this is my y-intercept. And my y-intercept here is the +5. So we're going to go on our y-axis and graph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we need to identify my m, or my slope. Here, my slope, the number in front of that x is a -2. If slope is always written as rise over run, how can I write -2 as a fraction? Well, any number could be written as a fraction if you put it over 1. So that denominator there is 1. So that then tells me that the -2, if I'm rising, that tells me I'm going down 2. And then it's a +1, so that tells me I'm going to the right 1. So from that y-intercept, I'm going to go down 2. And right 1, I'm going to go down 2, right 1, down 2, right 1, down 2, right 1, and continue the pattern. Now, if I had to go the other direction, I need to do the opposite. So instead of going down 2, I'm going to go up 2. Instead of going right 1, I'm going to go left 1. So from that y-intercept, I'm going to go up 2, left 1, up 2, left 1.
Finally, I have all my points plotted, so I need to draw the line and make sure I have my arrows. So I'm going to take my straight edge, draw my line, and make sure I have my arrows at the end. And then last step, finally, I'm going to label the line with the equation. So I need to take that y equals negative 2x plus 5 and draw that on the line.
For example 3, we have y equals x plus 2. First step is to identify my y-intercept. So my y-intercept here, or my b, is a positive 2. So I'm going to go on my y-axis, plot that positive 2. Then we need to identify our slope, or our m, and that's the number in front of the x. There is no number. What's that invisible number that's in front of the x there? It's an invisible 1. And then how do I write that 1 as a fraction? Well, it's the same as 1 over 1. So then we need to use our slope formula of rise over run here. So 1 over 1, so that's a positive 1 over a positive 1. So rise, that tells me I'm going up 1, and then run is to the right 1. So from my y-intercept here, I'm going to go up 1, right 1, up 1, right 1, up 1, right 1, and continue that pattern. Now to go the opposite direction, I would need to do the opposite. So instead of up 1, I'm going to go down 1. Instead of right 1, I'm going to go left 1. So from that y-intercept, I'm going to go down 1, left 1, down 1, left 1, down 1, left 1, and continue that pattern.
So then finally, we're going to draw our line and put our arrows at the end. And lastly, we're going to label the line.
Okay, so for the final example, we're going to try the same steps. The first thing we're going to do is we need to graph our y-intercept. Here, there's nothing there for the y-intercept. So if there's nothing there, what does the y-intercept equal? 0, right? It's the same thing as if I had a plus 0 there. So on my y-axis, I need to go to 0 and plot my y-intercept. Then we're going to look at our slope. And my slope here is 3. And the way that we write 3 as a fraction is we put it over 1. So we're going to follow that rise over run. So it's a positive 3 over a positive 1. So that tells me I'm going up 3 and right 1. So from my y-intercept, I'm going to go up 3 and right 1. Up 3, right 1. Up 3, right 1. Then we need to go in the opposite direction. Instead of up 3, we're going to go down 3. Instead of right 1, we're going to go left 1. So from the y-intercept, I'm going to go down 3, left 1. Down 3, left 1. Down 3, left 1.
Then we're going to take our straight edge and we're going to draw a line through the graph, all those points to make our line. Draw arrows on our line. So we're going to draw the line and the arrows. And then finally, we cannot forget to label our graph. So I have y equals 3x.